you all for being here. We really are excited to have Zahra, Rasool, and Manuel Soto with us today to talk about their exceptional work. And to kick things off, I'm Caitlin Burns. I'm executive producer at StoryTech Immersive. Thank you so much for joining us for the Vancouver International Film Festival's VR Day. So I'm just going to let you introduce yourselves and speak for your own work. You've both brought video with you to talk about certain pieces. So I'd love to kick off today, starting with you, Zahra. If you want to introduce yourself and your company and cue up the pieces that we've got for you today. Press everything, yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm the editorial lead for Contrast VR, which is a studio that's owned by Al Jazeera. So we work on content for Al Jazeera, but we also work externally with NGOs, organizations, clients to create immersive content.
Very cool. And you have a piece that has just come out that we have here in exhibition that's also, well, two pieces that we have in preview in the VIFF featured section for those of you on the video watching at home in the future, or those of you with HTC Vives at home. If you go to Viveport, you'll see these two pieces on the front page for the film festival today. So we've got two. I Am Rohingya. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that one, or should we roll tape first?
Sure. I Am Rohingya is a story about Jamalida. She's a 25-year-old woman who was persecuted in Myanmar and fled Myanmar to come to Bangladesh. And so we went to Bangladesh and filmed with her at the refugee camp.
Fantastic. So let's key up that first video.
Every day, I wonder how I'm going to survive in this refugee camp. My two sons and I are new here. We came to Bangladesh after being persecuted in Myanmar. Peace be with you. I am Jamalida Begum. I'm 26 years old. I live in Kutupalong refugee camp in Bangladesh. I'm a Rohingya Muslim. Some call us the most unwanted people in the world. I want to talk to you. God has made this possible. I hope you will tell others about my story.
So obviously, this piece is incredibly important right now. How did you find your way to this piece, and tell us a little bit about what went into making it?
So we're a really new studio. We only launched in April of this year. And so when I was deciding upon the editorial strategy, we had to use immersive content to tell stories within the news and documentary space. And when we were thinking about what should be the goal for the studio, what is it that we're aiming for, we decided upon that we wanted to create experiences about communities that are facing injustice, facing oppression. We want to tell stories from the global south. We wanted to take some of the most pressing issues that we're facing today and tell them through an immersive frame. And so, of course, when that became our mandate for the kind of content we wanted to create, the first story that we decided to tell was the story of the Rohingyas in Myanmar, because it was a story that was so underreported at that point. We went to film this in April. This is way before the crisis had escalated. And so when we finished post, of course, the situation worsened, and then we decided that we wanted to release the film. Earlier, it was supposed to premiere here, but we released it last week in partnership with Amnesty International because we felt that it was important for people to know about what's happening. We wanted to get the word out about the situation.
Very cool. We'll come back to this later and go in more depth, but I'd like to switch over for a moment. Actually, I think let's talk for a second about the other piece that we were going to talk about today, and then I'll move over to you, Angel. So in that sort of context of communities and stories from the global south, where I think it's a pretty well-known fact that we just don't have as many stories or as many features relating to the global south or a lot of these communities that you're targeting to find those voices. Tell us a little bit about Oil in Our Creeks.
So Oil in Our Creeks is a story about environmental degradation in Nigeria. We follow Leslie Phillips, who's 25 years old, and she takes us into her community in Port Harcourt, and she shows us the impact the oil spill has had in her village. And what we've done here in this film is that we've actually divided the 360 screen into 180, 180, where on one side you see the live action footage that we captured of the community and the devastation post the oil spill, and on the other side, we create through animated art what her village used to look like before the oil spill.
Great. So let's run that piece as well.
"10 years ago, this creek in the mangrove swamps was busy with fishing boats. This is near Bodo City, a town in the Niger Delta in Nigeria. This area was once full of green plants, thick enough to provide shade for resting fishermen. In late 2008 and early 2009, a corroded shell pipeline burst. It spilt toxic crude oil into the creeks, killing the mangrove swamps, local wildlife, and the fisheries. Fishermen and fish farmers, like community activist Pastor Christian, were once able to catch enough fish in the swamps to build homes and send their children to university.
No fish. No living organism.
Amnesty International estimates it could take up to $1 billion and over 20 years to restore the community to health.
So, like those airy crabs.
So, how did you find this particular community, and why did you pick this one to in the whole of the area that was affected by the spill?
So this project came out of a discussion with my friend. He's Nigerian American, and he was telling me about the situation there and telling me about the oil spill. And you know, we just thought that it would be such a compelling story to tell in VR, in this medium. And so, you know, that was the starting point. And then we worked with an organization called Sustainability International that focuses on the cleanup there in Nigeria to find a community that we could go visit, spend time with, and do the story.
Very cool. We'll come back to that one as well later. Moving over now to Angel Manuel Soto, we have your piece, Bashir's Dream, to talk about today, and I know we'll dive into more of what you're up to now, but why don't you tell us a little bit about it before we run the video?
Well, I'm Angel Manuel Soto. I'm from Puerto Rico, and I live in LA, and I'm a director for RYOT News. We used to work together, did a couple projects together. And yeah, well, we started by doing sort of like the same thing that Contrast is doing now, and reaching out with NGOs and also themes of interest and of social impact, and just shining a light on areas and countries around the world that wouldn't have had the opportunity to be exposed otherwise. Like with Bashir's Dream, which was serendipitous, the way we found that story.
Fantastic. So in all of these pieces, you're seeing a flat, fixed frame representation of 360-degree pieces that I cannot encourage you strongly enough to check out in head-mounted displays or headsets. But let's now play Bashir's Dream, and we'll see that in two frames in this fantastic, gorgeous projection screen.
My name is Jose Basir Masam. I am 14 years old. I am a refugee here in Amman, Jordan. My family and I escaped the war 3 years ago. I came here with my father, my mother, and my 2 siblings. This is our home now. I am from Daraa, Syria, and 4 years ago, I got shot by a sniper. I was going out to buy candy when a sniper shot me in my back. Someone came to help me, but the sniper shot him in his head, and he died. A woman came to see who got shot. After that, she called my father and told him I got shot. My father came. And took me with his car to the field hospital. I don't remember much. I lost a lot of blood, and on our way, I fainted.
So, in Bashir's dream, we're again getting a first-person story in an area that, we hear a lot about, but often it's very observational, seen from afar. Tell us a little bit about how you found Bashir and what really drew you to him as a person to talk to in this case.
Yeah, when I went to Jordan, I first went to do a documentary series for Save the Children, and it's almost like a 30-hour flight. And on our way there, they postponed the commercial.
Oh, wow.
So we landed and we had no signal. We found out that the commercial got postponed like a week in Jordan. Because we stay like in the desert with the Bedouins, and we had an amazing experience with them. So once we went to Amman, that we found out that we were not gonna do the commercial till like a couple of weeks later. Our fixer, who happens to be also a war journalist, a Syrian war journalist, a Syrian refugee war journalist in Jordan, tells us that there's this kid that he's been visiting for a while, who has an amazing story to tell. And he's in a wheelchair, but he's really funny, he's very lively, but you need to hear his story. So he took us to the frontier. Like, we could see the blocks of smoke on the other side. And I met with him. We only had a couple hours. It was probably like 4 hours with him, because of the long distance travel. But it was enough to hit us hard, and not hit us hard in a sentimental way, because you sympathize and you feel a lot because you're there, but it was the kid's resilience. And he told the story with a smile. He would joke about the guy that got shot in the head. Like, he's trying to cope with his reality. And for me, I found it very inspiring, because we complain about stupid things all the time. And they've had it bad. So when he was telling his story and everything, and we kept asking, like, so what's your goal? What do you want to do? And he's like, I just want to study so that I can travel and I can play basketball. That's all he wants to do, play basketball and travel, and get healed. He just wants to get better. So it was like, wow, his story is amazing. We went back to LA, started editing, and we had the one-on-one interview with him telling us how he got shot. Like the whole description is him telling the story and translated. And after talking for a little bit with the team, it was like, why don't we dramatize the whole thing, but as an animation, but an animation that will be from a kid's perspective, because he's telling it with a smile, like he's not crying, he's not sad. So we tried to use that innocence, that childhood innocence, and apply it to an adult situation, a very mature situation. And that's how Bashir's dream came to be.
You know, I'd love to get a sense from both of you of where you started your careers and how you found your way to this 360-degree media. Zahra, tell us how you made your way to where we're at now.
I was born and raised in Mumbai. I went to school in the United States. I went to the Missouri School of Journalism, did my undergrad there, my master's. So I come from a very traditional journalism background. I started my career with Al Jazeera. I started doing investigative documentaries. So this wasn't a road that I when I was studying, thought I was going to take. I was working for Fault Lines at that point of time, and then had my own startup for a little bit, and then I got introduced to RYOT and was working as a managing editor there for a bit. And that's where I got introduced to the 360 medium, because they're a company that specializes in 360 video. And then, of course, after that, I came back to Al Jazeera to lead their immersive media studio.
Tremendous. And Angel, tell us a little bit about how you found your way to 360 degrees.
Yeah, well, I come from a traditional background of narrative fiction. I've never been into the whole world of documentary or journalism until I did a documentary back home for a special project called El Pugil that premiered in Tribeca in 2016. And it was through that I was like, I like this whole idea, because all my narrative stuff has always been very based on reality, and the artistic approach I take on my films tend to be very neorealistic. So it wasn't that far from the way documentaries are told with the human eye. So when I went to the States to finish the post-production of my film, and I stayed, I got introduced to RYOT because I was already exploring the whole world of VR out of curiosity. I thought it could be, it was a mess, the whole thing, like nobody knew what to do, but the potential to use it as a different way of storytelling for me was very appealing. So I just started to experiment with it, making a lot of mistakes and doing a bunch of garbage. But it was fun because I was like, wow, like what would it be to tell a story this way? Because I'm used to doing it a different way. So through that curiosity, I got introduced to RYOT, and we started having access to all these stories and actually start to find how to put it into form.
Tremendous. So in all three of the pieces that we saw the previews of and the beginning of Bashir's dream today, we're really looking at primary source narratives. Tell me a little bit about how you chose to have primary source narrators. Was that a real strong choice that you are focusing on across your work? Or was it simply, this is the story we have to tell?
So I think the stories that do best in this medium are character-led narratives. Those are, I think, best suited for the medium. So we decided, we sort of decide we want to focus on a particular issue, and then for both of the documentaries, I'm Rohingya and Oil in Our Creeks, we then found characters that we could work with in order to tell the story. Because our main goal is to be able to immerse somebody else into another person's reality. And that is best told by letting the person lead the narrative.
Oh, for yourself.
Yeah, it is definitely the best way because you create an emotional connection with a person, and it definitely serves a purpose. In the case of like Bashir's dream, it definitely helped a lot that it was the kid telling the story, not the mom telling the story of the kid, or not my impression of what the kid went through. So giving them that first person perspective and letting them tell their story without me imposing my Western views or anything like that, it is definitely the best way. We worked on one where we're trying to express a macro, like about Puerto Rico, for example, which is so complex and so divisive that having one person tell the story would actually do more of a disservice to the message. And we let different people carry the narrative.
But that was still character-led.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was.
Multiple
If
characters.
multiple characters go and tell the story, like we didn't manipulate anything, we didn't tell them what to say, and we didn't even say our impressions on it. We let them tell their own stories. And yeah, even if it's on a multiple character level or a personal level, I honestly do believe that the message comes across stronger when it's based on authenticity.
One of the things that I love about both of your pieces, and I've also found in my own work, I've done some 360-degree directing and producing in Mozambique with UNICEF USA, is a lot of areas are places where people, at least in North America, will never get to travel. And the opportunity to meet people in 360 degrees, it carries with it a certain degree of, it feels closer to meeting someone in their own homes or neighborhoods or cities. And I think the thing that always strikes me is how much I feel that a story is humanized. And not in a way that it dismisses the more tragic or really dire aspects of the story, but to me it helps me see the way that people in these areas are smart and competent and incredibly sophisticated in their thinking about very mature topics. Like with Bashir, it's stuff that, I think would stop most American adults in their tracks if it happened to them. But there's a certain resilience to that. And I think when you're thinking about the intention of the work that carries forward, how much thought do you give to what you want to show about, or to encourage a next step from the audience? Is it the goal to create a deeper emotional connection to the work, to the events or people, or is there more of an emphasis on how can we inspire people to do something next in the piece?
That's a really interesting comment. But I also think that it's a double-edged sword. As a content creator, as a journalist, when I'm doing these stories and using this medium. As you've seen in all of these three pieces, and you mentioned you went to Mozambique, a lot of the stories that are told in 360 video, that are told in VR, are from communities that are less privileged than the developed world. And so there is this, natural tendency to go to these places, inside these communities, to tell those stories. But a lot of the content creators within the space come from really privileged backgrounds, are mostly white too. So, the responsibility becomes higher in order to tell the stories of these people more authentically. The other thing is that a VR camera is recording all around you. It's not fixed in one direction. So a lot of people that don't want to be or have not consented to being part of your story now become part of your story. So you are even more responsible to those people and to those communities to be honest in the way you're portraying them, projecting their situation, telling their story. So I think that the responsibility becomes so much more when you're using this medium to tell those stories. And so in both these pieces, I'm Rohingya and in Oil in Our Creeks, the first thing before deciding what sort of editorial goes is which are the people that we can collaborate with in order to make sure that the communities are represented well. So a lot of the people in the crew are actually locals, are people who belong to those communities, who have worked on those issues, so they can serve as check and balances for us, that we're making sure that we are doing our best to represent these people well.
This was very much my next question to you guys. What do you look for when you're finding local producers and collaborators? And, how critical is it to lock in a group that's going to help you connect to the community on the ground when you're going in?
It's definitely the most important thing. There's the factor that there's language, there's culture, there's so many things that come in place that you need to be willing to accept and follow through. And also, when it comes to stories like that, like with Bashir's Dream, we didn't go with a preconceived idea of the story that I wanted to tell. We just stumbled with a great story and we just let them do it. Like, I may have an idea of what the war is like. I may have an idea of how we can solve this, everything, but it's nonsense. At the end of the day, if I wanted to create an emotional connection with somebody who's there, so just letting them be, not touching it. I'll work with it on the editing, but getting out of it, it's something it's so beautiful, and I know for a fact that I wouldn't have been able to do anything like that if it wasn't for the fixer, or watch. It's really bad with his name, but he was amazing with us, and he was sensible to not just to the fact that we wanted to tell a story pure and authentic, but he also was sensible to the community and the people that we wanted to interview. If he even felt that this is an amazing story to tell, but it's not the moment, he wouldn't do it.
Right.
And I think there's a lot of value on that.
And how do you prepare yourselves and your crews to go into areas, unless you're going to your hometown where you know everyone, you're always going to be coming in from the outside to a community or an issue. What do you do to help prepare your team for being good guests into someone's life?
I think that's always going to be a challenge. The one thing that we try to do is ensure that we have really strong pre-production, but there's only as much you can research and read about and inform yourself. When you go there, especially with I'm Rohingya, we went, I had read so much about these refugee camps and the situations that you see within them. But going into those refugee camps was a totally different experience. They were so crowded. There were so many kids. It was impossible to be able to film without people coming too close to the camera. And so those are just realities that you have to face when you go inside, when you go into the situation. But in terms of preparing ourselves, I think the best thing we can do is have really strong fixers, co-producers who come from those communities, who can guide us in terms of what are the things we should be doing, what are things we should not be doing, and also help us editorially to make sure we're asking the right questions, that we're trying to keep our stereotypes and prejudices in check as much as we possibly can.
Yeah, adding to what she's saying also, not going completely clueless about what's happening. I think it's your duty to know as much as you possibly can, and we have the privilege of having information in our phones, like knowing as much as we possibly can about the subject matter, about the country, and about the issues, in order to have that sensibility.
How does working in the 360-degree frame change your on-site work as productions? Are you doing the same thing but many times? Is there a substantial shift in how you produce versus how you would have gone in before with a single camera system?
It is very substantial. It used to be fun when you could just hide behind the camera, but now there's nowhere to hide. So either underneath the tripod or behind the rock or wherever you might want to find yourself in. But it definitely changed everything, and it also brings perspective. Sometimes in those places you have like the opportunity to, if you have traditional camera, like you can sit behind, drink the water and eat something, and it's kind of like, it's very hypocritical. At the point you're seated down and they're like sweating. Like here you have to be one of them, and that's how it's only gonna happen if they allow you to come in. Like I don't have the capacity of shooting a long lens, hiding on the bushes. No. You need actually to make a connection with the community.
To me, for us, the pre-production remains the same. We give a lot of emphasis on research and spending substantial amount of time getting the story right before we actually go into the field. Things change a lot in the field when we're filming in 360 compared to traditional documentary. I know when I used to work for Fault Lines, it was completely unacceptable if you staged shots. That's just not what you do in documentary. But in the 360 medium, that's the only way to do it, because you have to make sure you're not in the shot, that things are moving around the 360 camera so that you're getting enough action so that you justify using the medium. And so staging sort of becomes essential in many ways. And so that's very different from traditional documentary filmmaking. And then the other thing, as I mentioned before, is that the sense of responsibility is so much more. So now you're not just focused on what's in front, your main character, but you have to make sure everything around you're doing justice, and you're capturing that accurately. And so you're focused a lot more on your complete environment, not just on your subject.
We did one that we had to justify our presence in the camera because it was the only way to do the documentary. It was impossible to just leave it there without somebody probably like knocking it out or something. So it was us trying to like hold the camera. Like it was really weird, but we made it work. And we established it from the beginning, and it helped also.
Because of the difference in the way that you have to build the shots, does that create a situation where you have to be more collaborative with your subject?
Absolutely, I think so. Because now it's not just about capturing the event of what's happening around you. It's about making sure that that event makes sense in the 360 format. And so a lot of the times, especially in the I Am Rohingya, we worked on sequencing some of the shots. And there we have the shot where Jamalida is walking from her hut down to the water pump. And she's exiting her hut, that's one shot. Then she's walking down the stairs, another shot, and then she goes to the water pump where she's washing her clothes and her son is bathing. That was the third shot. So the three sequences was something we had to ask her to do again and again until we were able to capture it well in the 360 camera.
Very cool. So switching gears a little bit, Oil in Our Creeks and Bashir's Dream both use animation as a tool to use the full field of view in a different way. Tell us a little bit about how you made that choice, and did you start with that in mind, or did it grow from the work once you had that story in place?
With Bashir's Dream, it came after it was edited. It came as we didn't think about it at all. I mean, Bashir's Dream wasn't an intentional documentary. We just happened to be at the right time, at the right place, with the right people. The whole thing with the animation came as a necessity to try to convey his message in a way that could entertain and also engage in emotion. His defense mechanism was laughing and smiling, so the harshness of what he went through wasn't communicated how, like what he was saying was not apart with his face. And so doing the animation kind of like played an homage to what he really went through without trying to beat people over the head. Like we didn't make it gory, we didn't make it anything like that. We just made it as pure as possible to his reality. So it came out naturally as a decision that came out afterwards. And luckily it played out really well.
So with our pieces, both I Am Rohingya and Oil in Our Creeks both have animation. So in I Am Rohingya, we knew that her persecution, the story of her persecution in Myanmar, was the core of a story. There was no way for us to be able to go to Myanmar to shoot that footage because we just didn't have access to the country. And the only other way to tell it was through animations. And so, we knew that we had to use that medium in order to tell her complete story. With Oil in Our Creeks, also, we knew we were going to use animation because we wanted to tell the story in a more innovative way, and just showing the village and the devastation seemed seemed like it would be a really depressing story. And Leslie is our character is just is so vibrant and full of hope, and we wanted to be able to communicate some of that hope and her hope in rebuilding the future. And so while you see the footage captured is about the devastation, the animations show what the community used to look like and what she hopes the community can return to.
When you're working with animators, I'm assuming you're working with animators who have some experience animating for the 360-degree field of view, yeah?
Yes
No?
and no.
Okay, but how do you work with them? What are you providing them? How does that process work? Are you providing them with sort of primary source images? What is that process like?
Well, in mine, with the animator is my best friend Fernando. He's a great animator and designer. But the software that he uses has the capacity of doing stereo VR. He just never done it before. He had no idea how it works. None of the theories, nothing. But he's very good at telling a story in animation. So you either way, when you create a world in animation, you have to build it. So it was kind of like easy for him to transition into the technical aspects of creating an animation. But I had to be with him during the development of the direction of the characters, because it would be natural for him to keep thinking that this is one frame, that we're only looking that way, and not the effects of like not nauseating. Like at the end of Bashir's dream, he's playing basketball in a wheelchair and he just lifts stuff and flies into space. And he just keeps flying, and it's beautiful, and there's books and everything, and he dunks the ball in it's his imagination flying. So when he did that, it was like Iron Man, I was like, we have to take it easy, because in VR, and it's like guiding them a little bit. It didn't become too difficult for him to understand the logic behind, and now he's just doing a lot of VR animations.
Yeah. And for you, you're looking at animation, but also trying to bring the qualities of real places that existed in a certain way before you were there. So what is that process like, and who are you working with to bring it to life?
So for Oil in Our Creeks, the animations were done by Angela Haddad, and she's a very, very talented animator, and she specializes in animations for VR. So she's absolutely brilliant, and it was a pleasure working with her. That experience was much easier than working with the animator in I Am Rohingya. And Maria, who's sitting there, is actually the post-production genius for both the films, and she is the one who coordinated with the animators and worked with them to bring this to life. And she can tell you more in depth here, but the animator for I Am Rohingya had never done animations in 360 degrees. So it took us a very long time to get the animations right. And Maria created these mood boards, and she created her what she felt she wanted in the post-production in Adobe, in Photoshop, and Illustrator, and then send that over to her. And then every animation, we went back and forth to make sure we got it right, because she was not experienced in 360 animations before. She's a very talented animator herself, but this was her first 360 project.
Now think of VFX, but when you're doing a 360-degree video, every single one is a little bit of a VFX shoot. So how has that changed the way you think about your post process or the timelines you're working with partners? Just the post parameters, what sort of, do you have a set time for post that you've allocated? Or, how long did it take you to discover you needed animation? And were you doing this independently, or did you have, a producer like me working for a company breathing down your neck to get it out on time?
With Bashir's dream, it started with somebody wanted to jump in and breathe down my neck, but I managed to get rid of that. And yeah, because I was like, we can get it out quick, but it's gonna look like shit. It's not gonna look good, and people are not gonna enjoy it.
Right.
So I got the whole project, hold it hostage, and released it when I thought it was perfect.
Wonderful.
So I had that opportunity and privilege, which is non-existent in any other way, shape, or form, unless you finance it yourself.
Right.
So yeah, it was a very unique situation that I was able to control everything and have it come out the way I wanted it. Because even when we went to shoot, I was with a producer, but it was just me with the camera doing everything. The producer was just there helping me out carry heavy stuff. But it was just me, all by myself.
Right.
Luckily, we shot it with the Jump, which has self-stitching cloud algorithm, and that does help. It did help a lot. It made it so much easier.
Yeah. And so for you, you're working with Al Jazeera as your partner, yeah? How do you treat sort of the timeliness of events and, you know, when you think of news organizations, you think trying to get the news out quickly with the need to go deeper and to build these projects that, you know, take longer than a traditional video to be able to complete them?
Absolutely. So we're owned by Al Jazeera, and early on I realized that we're just not capable of handling breaking news, just because these pieces, you know, even 360 videos that are meant or created for Facebook and YouTube take a while in post, and so being able to do breaking news is very challenging. And so we decided early on that that's not a territory that we wanted to tread into, especially given our team's so small and we were just launching. Our editorial team consists of 4 of us right now. And so we decided that we wanted to focus on stories that would make sense within the medium and in which we could go deeper and add something extra to the story and the narrative using the medium.
Very cool. And what is it like working with the teams that are writing the pieces connected to your work? You know, it's a great opportunity to have a full crew of journalists to be able to support the release of your projects. And I've really enjoyed the pieces that have been published with the release of I Am Rohingya. What is that like? How do you connect with the journalists that are helping support your work?
I think it's an incredible opportunity. Al Jazeera, we're lucky working at that organization because we have access to just so many terrific journalists in so many different parts of the world. And it's also just a really fulfilling experience because we're able to bring our different expertise. So with I Am Rohingya, we worked with Ayla Callan, who is a freelance journalist for Al Jazeera. And she was one of the first journalists to be stationed in Myanmar when the country was open to foreigners. And so she specializes in the subject. She has as much information anybody can have about the region and the issues. And so to be able to collaborate with those people to make sure that we're getting our stories right as we possibly can, I think just makes the work even more powerful.
And are you getting pitches from journalists who would want you to come out and work in their area? Are you finding, you know, pieces by journalists that are inspiring you? How does that work in your team?
Absolutely. So the way it works currently for us is that journalists within the news organization will pitch to us and will tell us that, you know, we think we want to do this story in 360 video. And since we're so new and a lot of journalists within the organization do come from a traditional journalistic background, so they don't really kind of get 360 video or VR. And so a lot of the pitches we go back telling them, actually, this is not really a good fit for the medium. Just because you can do it doesn't mean you should do it. And so that's the reason why we're focusing a lot in the early stages on education and training. So we have training sessions for journalists where they come into our studio and we train them on not just how to use the camera, but what are the best practices, how do you think about storytelling within this medium, so that when they go out on deployments or when they're pitching to us, they're making sure that we're getting stuff that's usable and that does justice to 360 video.
Angel, how are you finding your news stories? Are people coming to you to seek you out for your work, or are you seeking out new projects based on, I mean, tell us about what you're up to and how you find it.
It's a little bit of both. But right now at the moment, it's been stuff that I'm passionate about. Lately, more of the documentaries that I've been able to do, the main subject is the Antilles, like Haiti, or Cuba, Puerto Rico. So which are subjects that I'm knowledgeable and I know firsthand and I'm very passionate about. Especially with the economic climate right now with Puerto Rico and everything that's been going on. So those have been subjects that I've been following for years now. Actually, the first one I did it with Zahra. We went to Puerto Rico, and from then on, it's been an ongoing investigation, and the plot always thickens, so it's always a mess. So there's always something to tell.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there's other stories that come to us, like we did one on the crisis in the border, that it came to us from the people from No More Deaths. And obviously it's something that I feel strongly and the team felt very strongly about, so we just went for it. Like, we know about the subject and it was just a perfect fit.
Wonderful. And I know we're all looking forward to seeing your next pieces and to see the results of the projects you have really deep understanding around. So I'd love to open it up to the audience for a few questions before we wrap up for the day and bring in our last panel. So does anyone have a question for our panelists? You, miss in the back over there.
Sorry, I missed the first part, so in case you covered something about this. But in terms of finding audiences and getting your work out, getting it seen, can you sort of speak to some of that? Because I know as a documentary filmmaker, sometimes it can be frustrating to pour your heart into something that's so important, and then face the challenge of it doesn't necessarily go viral, let's say. So kind of, but then I'm also curious if any of your work has been pulled, by the market, or that's my question.
I think we're both lucky to work for companies that have a distribution, and that is the huge part of creating this content, is getting it out. Both of these films, All in Our Creeks and I'm Rohingya, were actually made for the headset. But we also realized that that's not necessarily our entire audience, because we want to get the word out to as many people as we can. And so we released I'm Rohingya last week as a 360 video on Facebook. And we partnered with Amnesty International to release the film. So between Al Jazeera English Online, AJ Plus, we have 10 million plus, or over 20 million people on the Facebook page, and then Amnesty has around over 10 million. So we did manage to get a huge distribution for the video. The engagement was pretty high, and we were surprised that we were able to get as many people to watch the piece.
Yeah, adding to her the same thing with RYOT being part of the Verizon conglomerate, it helps a lot to have that. But also the relevance of the pieces and the information that comes out. With the last thing we did, the last documentary we did about Puerto Rico, we partnered with The Intercept and started, digging deeper on the whole concept of disaster capitalism and how neocolonialism is taking place and all that other stuff, which is tending to be a little bit very relevant with this president that we have now. And stuff like that also helps a lot to get the word out and get people riled up and share the information. With Bashir's Dream, what helped a lot also was the festival circuit. The critics and Vimeo staff picks, stuff like that, just gets so much out there than, because there was a fatigue of the whole Syrian crisis, and it's a shame that people see it that way. But there were so many information out there and documentaries about it that it gets lost on all the noise. So like those type of exposures has helped a lot.
I think this really keys back to a lot of the themes we've heard over the course of the day today, and also from the industry exchange yesterday, that each one of these pieces of work really deserves and requires a coordinated effort to understand not just how to market or promote it, but how to build it into a larger system where there are more touch points to help fish where fish are in terms of audiences, and be able to find that community around your piece where there's a real direct connection to the work that you can build from to build those audiences up. And if you don't have a massive conglomerate or partner behind you that you've got to do that work as much as you can around your own independent piece.
Yeah, and like Zahra said, like people do things for the headset when not like nobody has a headset. So you have Facebook and YouTube and Vimeo now who allows you to do 360 video. Like,
Yeah.
you know, you can do the VR experience, that's fine, but find a way to do the funnel. You know, you can go from like room scale experience to simple 360 video.
Yeah.
And what you just mentioned, the distribution, is even more, if not more important than creating a good piece of content. Because there are a lot of people that are doing amazing stuff out there, but if it's not distributed in the right way, people don't see it.
Right, right. And, you know, as you say, the reality is that the larger addressable market is not the head-mounted display owning market. But if we're going to get people into them, that high-quality content, we need to find ways to feed them into that system, to understand it and know how to use it, but also to see the power of it. So, yeah. Next question, you, sir.
How do you break down budget on this? How do you forecast?
No.
Let's get these things late. How do you forecast and how do you basically look at a revenue stream? Obviously, Al Jazeera, is this a lost leader? Or are they making money on this? How is this working?
How do you break down the budgets? Yeah.
Long question.
I am the worst enemy for producers. I don't care about budget. I go all out. Like, they need to stop me when it comes to budget.
With Al Jazeera, we get a budget for editorial. We don't really have a revenue model. This is very uncommon though within the news industry. No matter what news organization you work for, you're supposed to bring in revenue. Thankfully, we don't have to do that. But despite that, despite us not having any revenue commitments, we are starting more and more to work in the sponsored content space, because we realize that if we work with nonprofits or partners who we align on editorially, we can at least get our production funded for. And so that's what we're trying to do more of.
Yeah, I'm sorry. In the case of RYOT also, RYOT does a lot of branded content which is supposed to keep us afloat. But being part of AOL, it's like it's an unlimited bank, which they need to stop me.
Well, I think that there's also a real advantage to creating those co-production partnerships in terms of your distribution. Absolutely. You know, the stronger the community of interest that has a stake in the work, the stronger the energy they're going to put into helping you reach out to their community as well. So it's not just a matter of funding, but building the strongest ecosystem around your project you can.
Yeah.
Next question, you sir in the back.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if you guys could talk a little bit about working within communities, because I think that documentary can traditionally be exploitive, but I think that with VR and 360, it has the potential to be even more exploitive because you can be inhabiting bodies and our spaces. And so if you guys could talk a little bit about your practices with that.
Go ahead.
Absolutely, and I think that is what makes this medium even more challenging to work in. It's not the technical aspects of it; those always can be overcome with expertise and skills. But it is making sure that you're representing those communities authentically and honestly. And as I mentioned before, so much of content that's created in this space is about communities that are less privileged, communities of color, and the content is being created predominantly by white content creators. And so there is a lot of things that personally, in my opinion, I see a lot of content and just like, just because you could have gone there and you could have told the story this way doesn't mean you should have. And so for what we do is with every project that we are working on, we make sure we are collaborating with producers, we're collaborating with storytellers, with fixers that are from the community. At least that doesn't guarantee that we are going to tell the story honestly 100%, but we are doing our best to make sure that we are representing those communities with as less bias as we possibly can, and telling their story in a way that they would like to be represented.
Yeah. piggyback on that note, what we try to do at Riot is attach a cause or a call to action after you witness this experience. We understand the power that VR documentaries have, the power that us as content creator have to actually be people that can bring or help people bring change. So we know that a lot of the people that view the content we create feel when they finish and they want to do something about it. At least that's my intention. It's not just sit there, I now I acknowledge this. I feel no, like call to action and try to get people to commit to do their part as much as their capacities allows them to.
And
Thank you.
And also in both the pieces that you see, I'm Rohingya and Oil in Our Creeks, it's really easy to go into these communities and tell you, oh, look at these people, look at how much they're suffering, look at the oppression, look at the injustice, and feel sorry for them. Thankfully, I come from a part of the world where I've seen a lot of that, and so I was really aware that that's not the message that we wanted to get across. What we wanted to show is that these are these people's reality. This is what life looks like for them on a day-to-day basis. And so we wanted to capture that sense of what life looks like for those people, rather than feeling sorry for them, looking down on them, or taking you into the situation or that location just because we could take you there. And so that's what we've tried to do, and hopefully we've come across and are able to do that.
I want to thank you both for being with us today, and for me, what is striking to me about the work that you build is you have these very serious topics, but to me as a viewer, I feel like you're always finding beauty in the space and that resilience in those stories where it helps connect that this is the lived reality, but it's not only the worst part of someone's life. Everyone has the rest of their life around them where they're all working together to improve their communities and to strive to have the best life they can have. I hope that you all will take the time to see I Am Rohingya and Oil in Our Creeks out in our VR lounge later today, and check out Bashir's Dream at home. I hope you'll give our panelists a big round of applause as we get our next panel up on stage.